I'm Elara, 30, female, and my family celebrated my 30th birthday by secretly flying over 6,000 miles to Tahiti without me. They left me behind in the cold, gray city we were all supposed to call home. A home I now realize was never truly mine to share, only to provide. The silence on my birthday wasn't the thing that broke me, nor was it the gut-wrenching discovery on social media. It was the simple, six-word reply my father typed out for the world to see, a reply that branded me, finalized my status, and in a twisted way, set me free. He called me a clown, and in that moment, the clown decided to fold up the circus tent for good. My family operates on a tiered system of affection, a pyramid where I have always formed the wide, sturdy, and utterly ignored base. At the pinnacle sits my father, Alistair. He is a man carved from granite and tailored in expensive suits, a corporate lawyer whose self-worth is measured in billable hours and courtroom victories. He views the world as a series of negotiations, and emotion is a liability, a weakness to be exploited in others and suppressed in oneself. His love isn't given. It's awarded, like a year-end bonus for exemplary performance. Just beneath him is my mother, Genevieve. She is beautiful, elegant, and perpetually anxious. Her primary role has always been to orbit my father, reflecting his light and soothing his moods. She is the velvet glove on his iron fist. Her love is a conditional thing, a fragile currency she spends mostly on my sister, Kasia, who has always been her prized investment. Mom sees Kasia's success as her own, a validation of her life choices. And then there is Kasia, my younger sister, the golden child, the surgical resident. She is my father's ambition and my mother's pride, all wrapped up in a neat, 27-year-old package. Kasia never failed. She got the perfect grades, chose the perfect career, and always said the perfect thing. She learned early on that the path to our parents' affection was paved with achievements they could boast about at dinner parties. Our family portrait was a carefully curated image, and Kasia was always in sharp focus. I, on the other hand, was the blurry figure in the background, the one you could crop out without losing the essence of the picture. My crime in their eyes was choosing a path they couldn't frame on a wall. I'm an indie game developer. To Alistair, this translates to unemployed and plays with computers all day. He couldn't grasp a world where success wasn't tied to a prestigious firm or a hospital residency. He saw my passion as a childish hobby, a prolonged phase of adolescent rebellion. The fact that I made a comfortable living from it, that I had a dedicated following online, that I was building worlds from scratch, none of it registered. It wasn't the kind of success he could brag about to his partners. It was, to him, an embarrassment. This dynamic, this blatant favoritism, wasn't a secret. It was the foundation of our family life. I remember my high school graduation. I had managed to get a small scholarship to a decent art and design college for my portfolio. It wasn't Harvard Law, but it was my dream. My parents attended the ceremony, their faces etched with a polite boredom. We went for a quiet, unenthusiastic dinner at a chain restaurant afterward. My father checked his watch 3 times. When I unwrapped my graduation gift, it was a $100 bill tucked inside a generic card. "Don't spend it all on video games," Alistair had said, a smirk playing on his lips. 2 years later, Kasia graduated from her pre-med program. The celebration was a week-long affair. My parents threw a massive catered party at the house, inviting everyone they knew. Colleagues, distant relatives, old family friends, all gathered to toast Kasia's bright future. Her gift was a brand new car, a gleaming sedan with a huge red bow on the hood. My mother cried tears of joy. My father gave a booming speech about legacy and pride, his hand resting on Kasia's shoulder as if she were a trophy he had just won. I stood in the corner of the yard, holding a lukewarm glass of champagne, feeling less like a daughter and more like a spectator who had wandered into the wrong event. Another time, the difference was even more stark. I had poured 2 years of my life into developing my first major game. The launch day was the most stressful and important day of my professional life. I had told my family about it for weeks, hoping for even a sliver of support. The day came and went in a blur of server crashes, bug fixes, and interacting with the new player community. It was a modest success, but it was mine. When I finally came downstairs from my office, exhausted but proud, my family was in the living room. They didn't ask how it went. They were too busy watching a recording of a local news segment that had featured Kasia for a whole 30 seconds, talking about a charity run the hospital was sponsoring. "Did you see her, Elara?" my mother asked, her eyes glued to the screen. She looked so professional, so confident. "My launch went well," I said quietly. Alistair didn't even look away from the TV. "That's nice," he said, the same way you'd speak to a child who just showed you a drawing of a misshapen tree. "Kasia, they said your segment might get picked up by the national affiliate." I just nodded and walked away. The message was always the same, delivered in 1,000 different ways. Kasia's life was primetime television. Mine was a forgotten public access show airing at 3 a.m. I was the family's resident clown, there for their mild amusement, or more often, their quiet disdain. I just hadn't realized they were ready to cut me from the show entirely. The day I turned 30 began not with a bang, but with an unnerving, deafening silence. I woke up expecting something, a half-hearted happy birthday text from my mother, perhaps, a perfunctory call from Kasia on her way to the hospital. Even a stiff, formal email from my father's secretary would have been within the realm of possibility. But there was nothing. The digital world on my phone was still, a calm sea without a single ripple from my family. I padded downstairs in my socks, the old wood of the staircase creaking under my feet. The house was quiet, too quiet. My parents' bedroom door was ajar, the bed inside perfectly made. Kasia's room was equally pristine, her usual clutter of medical textbooks and workout clothes conspicuously absent. A cold, heavy feeling began to settle in the pit of my stomach. They were gone, all three of them. I tried to reason with the rising panic. Maybe Alistair had a last-minute business trip. Maybe Mom went with him. Maybe Kasia was on a weekend retreat with friends. There were 100 logical explanations. But for all of them to be gone, on my birthday, without a single word, it felt less like a coincidence and more like a statement. I spent most of the day in a strange limbo, trapped between hurt and hope. I busied myself with work, trying to squash bugs in the code for my new game's beta version, but my mind kept drifting. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification from a friend or a follower, my heart would leap, only to sink again when I saw it wasn't from them. I ordered a pizza for dinner, eating 2 slices straight from the box while standing in the kitchen, the silence of the large house amplifying my solitude. It felt less like a home and more like a museum, a collection of objects that belonged to people who had moved on. The evening crept in, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The pizza box sat on the counter, a sad monument to a celebration that never was. I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, a habit born of boredom and a desperate need for distraction, when I saw it. It wasn't a post from my family directly. It was from a distant aunt, one of my mother's cousins who always commented on everything with an excessive number of heart emojis. She had shared a post from my mother's timeline. My mother, who kept her profile so private I rarely saw her updates, must have adjusted her settings. And there it was. The photo was painfully, vibrantly beautiful. My father, mother, and sister stood on a beach of impossibly white sand. Behind them, the water was a shade of turquoise so vivid it looked photoshopped. Alistair, who in my presence always looked like he was smelling something unpleasant, was grinning, a genuine, relaxed smile I hadn't seen in years. He had his arms around Mom and Kasia. Genevieve looked radiant, wearing a white sundress and a wide-brimmed hat, her usual anxiety melted away by the tropical sun. Kasia was laughing, her head thrown back, looking like a model from a travel magazine. They were the perfect picture of happiness. The caption my mother had written was simple: "The best family vacation. So blessed to be here in beautiful Tahiti with my wonderful husband and daughter." But it was the comment underneath, from one of my father's business partners, that twisted the knife. It read, "A wonderful day for a wonderful family." Tahiti, they were in Tahiti. The word echoed in my mind, each syllable a soft blow. It felt so impossibly far away, so luxurious, so intentional. This wasn't a weekend trip to the mountains. This was a planned, expensive, trans-Pacific journey. They had booked flights, reserved a resort, packed their summer clothes, and driven to the airport, all without me. The logistics of the lie were staggering. I sank onto the sofa, my phone clutched in my hand. My breath came in shallow, ragged bursts. I stared at their smiling faces, at the perfect blue sky behind them, and I felt a coldness spread through my chest, a glacial numbness that froze the tears in my eyes. It wasn't just that they had gone without me. It was that they looked so happy, so complete. The wonderful family in the picture didn't have a missing piece. It was who? I wasn't cropped out. I was never even in the frame. I thought about my birthday. My 30th birthday. A milestone. A day that was supposed to mean something. And they had chosen this exact day to demonstrate, in the most public and painful way possible, that I meant nothing. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had actively, meticulously erased me. The silence from the morning suddenly made sense. It wasn't an oversight. It was the sound of my absence. It was the sound of a door closing, thousands of miles away. And as I sat there in the dark, in the quiet house they had abandoned, I finally understood. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was a ghost in my own family. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the glowing screen. The happy family in Tahiti seemed to mock me from a different universe, a warmer, brighter one where I had no place. The initial shock gave way to a deep, aching hurt that felt like a physical weight on my chest. It was a familiar pain, the echo of 1,000 smaller slights, but amplified to an unbearable volume. Why? The question pulsed in my mind, a frantic, desperate heartbeat. Why would they do this? My fingers trembled as I navigated to the comment section of the post. My aunt's heart emojis, my dad's partner's platitudes, all of it blurred into a meaningless haze. I saw my own reflection in the dark screen, a pale, stunned face, eyes wide with a pain I couldn't articulate. Acting on an impulse I didn't fully understand, driven by a raw need for some kind of answer, any answer, I typed a single word. Why? I hit post before I could second-guess myself. The word just sat there, stark and vulnerable amidst the cheerful exclamation points. It was a tiny crack in the perfect facade of their family vacation. For a moment, I felt a surge of panic. What had I done? Exposing our family's dysfunction to their friends and colleagues was a cardinal sin in Alistair's rulebook. But the panic was quickly replaced by a strange, hollow calm. What did it matter? What more could they do to me? Leave me behind. They already had. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table, as if it were a venomous creature I was afraid to touch. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands shaking so badly that some of it sloshed over the rim. I leaned against the counter, the cold of the granite seeping through my shirt, and I waited. The whole house seemed to be waiting with me, holding its breath. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum from the refrigerator, sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. Minutes stretched into an hour. I didn't dare to look at the phone. I imagined the scenarios playing out in Tahiti. My mother seeing the comment, her face falling into a mask of anxious dismay. Her showing it to my father, her hand trembling. Alistair's face hardening, his leisurely vacation mood evaporating into cold fury. Kasia rolling her eyes, annoyed that my drama was intruding on their perfect getaway. The suspense was agonizing. Part of me hoped they would delete my comment and pretend it never happened. Another part, a darker, more wounded part, wanted a confrontation. It wanted a reason, no matter how cruel. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. My phone buzzed on the table, a sharp, jarring sound that made me jump. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked back into the living room and slowly, deliberately, picked up the phone and turned it over. A notification banner was at the top of the screen. Alistair replied to your comment. My thumb hovered over the notification, my breath caught in my throat. With a final, resigned sigh, I tapped it. The app opened and the page refreshed. There, directly under my lonely "why," was my father's response. It wasn't a private message. It was a public reply for everyone to see. We didn't want to waste our time on a clown. 6 words, 6 simple words that landed with the force of a physical blow. I read them once, then twice, the letters seeming to rearrange themselves into new, even crueler combinations. Clown. He had called me a clown, not to my face in the heat of an argument, but calmly, typed out on a keyboard from a beach paradise as a definitive statement of fact. It wasn't an insult, it was a classification. It was my official title in the family I no longer belonged to. The public nature of it was the most brutal part. He hadn't just said it to me, he'd announced it to his world. To his partners, his friends, my mother's relatives. He was branding me, ensuring everyone knew my place, or rather my lack of one. The pain that had been aching in my chest all day didn't intensify, it transformed. It crystallized into something hard, cold, and sharp. It was the feeling of a final door slamming shut, the lock clicking into place. The hope I didn't even know I was still clinging to, the foolish, childish hope that they might one day see me, that they might finally love me, died in that instant. It withered and turned. Into dust. Something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, a deep, cavernous wound, but a new feeling rose up to cover it, a strange, icy resolve. The tears that had threatened to fall all day retreated. My vision cleared. I looked at my father's words one more time, and a slow, humorless smile spread across my face. It probably looked terrifying. A clown, okay. Clowns were performers. Clowns were known for their grand finales. Clowns could sometimes be the stars of the show. My fingers, no longer trembling, moved across the screen with a newfound purpose. I hit reply under his comment. My response was just as short, but it was filled with a promise that only I understood. Surprise waiting for you. I posted it, then I blocked Alistair, Genevieve, and Kasha on every platform. I turned off my phone and set it aside. The conversation was over. The years of trying, of hoping, of shrinking myself to fit into their world were over. He had given me my label, and in doing so, he had handed me a permission slip. Permission to stop caring. Permission to stop playing by their rules. Permission to finally put myself first. That same day, sitting in the echoing silence of their abandoned home, I made a decision. The clown was about to give her final performance, and it would be one they would never forget. The decision didn't arrive in a flash of vengeful lightning. It settled over me slowly, calmly, like a blanket of fresh snow, covering the jagged landscape of my pain with a smooth, white certainty. My reply, surprise waiting for you, wasn't a threat born of anger. It was a statement of fact. For the first time, my path forward was illuminated by a single, unwavering light, the light of self-preservation. I spent the next hour walking through the silent house. It was a beautiful home, a large, 2-story colonial with a sprawling garden in the back. My parents' friends always complimented them on its good bones and classic elegance. Alistair would always nod proudly, accepting the praise as if he had laid every brick himself. He loved the image it projected, that of a successful, established patriarch providing a fortress of comfort for his family. But the house was built on a lie. A lie only I, and one other person, knew the truth of. That other person was my grandmother, my mother's mother, Elara. She was the one true dissident in our family. While my parents worshipped at the altar of conformity and status, Grandma Elara worshipped at the altar of authenticity. She was a painter, a woman with ink stains on her fingers and clay under her nails. She saw the world in vibrant color and texture, while my father saw it in black and white profit and loss statements. She was the only one who didn't look at me with pity or confusion. She looked at me with recognition. When I was a kid, hiding away in my room to sketch characters for imaginary worlds, she wouldn't tell me to go outside and play like a normal child. She would pull up a chair, peer at my drawings, and ask, "What's his backstory? What quest is he on?" When I got my first computer and started teaching myself to code, she didn't dismiss it as a waste of time. She bought me books on programming languages and celebrated my first clunky, homemade game as if I had composed a symphony. She knew what her daughter and son-in-law were like. "They are building a ship," she told me once, her voice raspy with age, "a fine, polished ship. But they will only take on passengers who help them sail where they want to go. Don't you ever let them convince you that you are just cargo, Elara. You are your own vessel." 3 years ago, Grandma Elara passed away. It was the first time I had felt a grief so profound it felt like a part of my own soul had been extinguished. At the reading of her will, the air in the lawyer's stuffy office was thick with anticipation. My parents and Kasia sat beside me, their expressions carefully neutral, but I could feel their greed, a palpable hum in the room. They expected her sizable estate to be divided, with the bulk of it going to my mother. But my grandmother had one last surprise for them. Her savings and investments were split evenly among all of us, including Kasia and me. But the house, the grand colonial home that my parents had lived in for 20 years, the house they believed was the very foundation of their social standing, that was another matter. To my granddaughter, Elara, the lawyer read from the will, his voice monotone, I leave my property at 127 Willow Creek Lane, in its entirety. It is hers and hers alone. He continued with a personal note from her. May it always be a safe harbor for your creative spirit, my dear. Don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, make you feel like a guest in your own home. The silence that followed was stunning. I remember the sharp, incredulous glance from Alistair, my mother's pale, slack-jawed shock, Kasia's confused frown. They had been living in my house. For 2 decades, they had been tenants, not owners. My grandmother had bought the house for my mother to live in when she first married, but she had always kept the deed in her own name, a fact she had never shared. And now, it was mine. In the car on the way home, Alistair had launched into a tirade. This is absurd, an insult, we'll contest it. She was clearly not of sound mind. He had looked at me in the rearview mirror. You will, of course, sign whatever is necessary to transfer the deed to your mother and me. It's the only decent thing to do. It's our home. But I remembered my grandmother's words. Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own home. For the first time, I stood up to him. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I'm not signing anything. It's what Grandma wanted. The fight was immense, but the will was ironclad. They couldn't legally touch it, so we settled into a new, unspoken arrangement. I, the owner, became the family's silent, live-in landlady. I never asked for rent. The idea felt monstrous at the time. I quietly paid the property taxes and the homeowner's insurance out of my own income, funds my father believed I didn't have. They, in turn, acted as if nothing had changed, as if the house was still theirs. They continued to host their parties, redecorate the living room, and treat me like the odd, perpetual child living in their basement. It was a fragile, toxic truce. Now, walking through the quiet rooms, my grandmother's words echoed around me. A safe harbor for your creative spirit, but it hadn't been a harbor. It had been a cage. A place where I paid the bills while being treated like an intruder. A place where my own family could plan a secret vacation to celebrate my birthday without me, using the very roof I provided as their launchpad. The clown comment wasn't just an insult about my career. It was an insult to my grandmother's legacy. They had taken her final, beautiful gift to me, a gift of security and independence, and turned it into just another tool for their emotional manipulation. My internal struggle, the constant tug-of-war between my desire for their love and the reality of their disdain, was finally over. The rope had snapped. I sat down at my desk, the same desk where Grandma Elara had watched me design my first characters, and I picked up my phone. This time, I didn't call a friend. I looked up the number for a real estate lawyer I had been referred to a year ago, just in case. My hand was perfectly steady as I dialed. Hello, I said, my voice clear and even. My name is Elara. I own a property, and I need to begin the process of a formal eviction. And after that, I'd like to discuss putting it on the market. The decision was made. The surprise was on its way. The 2 weeks that followed my phone call to the lawyer were some of the strangest of my life. I existed in a bubble of calm, detached focus, while an invisible storm gathered just over the horizon. The legal process moved with a swift, impersonal efficiency that I found deeply comforting. I signed documents via email, had a video conference with my lawyer, Mr. Davies, and approved the formal notice he had drafted. It was a standard, 30-day notice to vacate, citing owners' intent to sell the property. There was no emotion in its language, just cold, legal fact. The papers were scheduled to be delivered by a process server a few days after my family's return. They came back from Tahiti on a Tuesday night. I heard the front door open and the sound of their suitcases rolling across the hardwood floor of the foyer. I was in my office, the door closed, but the sound traveled up the stairs. I heard my mother's tired sigh, Cash's cheerful chatter about the flight, and Alistair's booming voice directing the placement of the luggage. They were tanned, rested, and utterly oblivious. For the next few days, they attempted to slot back into our old dynamic, but something had fundamentally shifted. The power balance was different, even if only I knew it. They tried to act as if nothing had happened, a classic family tactic for avoiding conflict. My mother knocked on my door the morning after their return. "Elara, dear," she said through the wood, "we brought you something." I opened the door. She stood there holding a small, brightly colored box. She offered it to me with a hesitant smile, her eyes searching my face for a reaction. I took it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a cheap-looking keychain, a plastic turtle with Tahiti printed on its shell. It was the kind of thoughtless souvenir you grab at the airport when you suddenly remember an obligation. It was an insult wrapped in a gesture of peace. "Thank you," I said, my voice flat. I put the keychain on my desk and looked back at her. There was no anger in my eyes, no hurt, just a placid emptiness. This unnerved her far more than any outburst would have. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked, twisting tea. He ring on her finger. "You seem quiet." "I'm fine," I replied, "just busy with work." I closed the door gently in her face. From then on, I was a ghost in my own house. I kept to my office or my bedroom. When I did have to go to the kitchen, I was brief and silent. I met their attempts at conversation with short, non-committal answers. I was a polite, detached stranger. My coldness was a wall they didn't know how to breach. They had expected anger, tears, a dramatic scene, things they knew how to handle, how to dismiss. They didn't know what to do with my silence. They interpreted it as sulking, a childish mood that would eventually pass. They had no idea it was the calm before the storm. Kasha tried a different approach. She cornered me in the hallway one afternoon. "Okay, what is your problem?" she asked, hands on her hips, her voice laced with the familiar annoyance she reserved for me. "Are you seriously still upset about the trip? We were going to do something with you for your birthday when we got back. Dad was just stressed. You know how he gets." I just looked at her. I saw the golden child, the one who never had to wonder if she was loved, demanding to know why the family clown wasn't performing her role of forgiving and forgetting. "I have to get back to work, Kasha," I said, and walked around her. The day the notice was set to be delivered, I felt a tremor of anxiety, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of rightness. Mr. Davies had advised me to be out of the house when it happened. I spent the afternoon at a coffee shop, nursing a single latte for 3 hours, my laptop open but my mind elsewhere. I was picturing the moment, a knock on the door, my mother opening it to a stone-faced stranger, the exchange of the envelope, the confusion turning to disbelief as she read the legal lettering. When I returned home in the late afternoon, the bomb had already detonated. The air in the house was thick with a toxic silence, far heavier and more menacing than the quiet of my solitary birthday. The notice, a crisp white envelope, was lying on the ornate mahogany table in the entryway. It looked alien, a piece of a different, harsher world dropped into their carefully curated domestic scene. I walked past it and went straight up to my room. I closed the door, my heart beating a steady, rhythmic tattoo against my ribs. I sat on my bed and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The first sound was not a knock, but a frantic, desperate pounding on my door. It was followed by a shrill, piercing scream that could only have come from one person. "Elara, open this door right now." It was Kasha. Her voice wasn't just angry, it was hysterical. The sound was so raw, so filled with panicked rage, that for a fleeting second I almost felt a sliver of pity. Almost. I took a deep breath, stood up, and opened the door. She was standing there, her face blotchy and red, her usually perfect hair in disarray. She was clutching the eviction notice in her hand, the paper crumpled from the force of her grip. My mother stood just behind her, her face a pale mask of shock, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. At the bottom of the stairs, I could see my father, Alistair, his expression a thunderous mixture of disbelief and fury. "What is this?" Kasia shrieked, shoving the paper toward my face. "What kind of sick joke is this?" "It's not a joke, Kasia," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "It's a legal document. It means you have 30 days to find a new place to live." "A new place to live?" she repeated, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "This is my home. I grew up here. You can't just throw us out. Where am I supposed to go? I'm a surgical resident. I work 80 hours a week. I don't have time to go apartment hunting because my crazy sister is having a tantrum." Her words, meant to be daggers, bounced harmlessly off the new armor I wore. Her panic, her inconvenience, it meant nothing to me. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said simply. My mother let out a strangled sob. "Elara, please," she whispered, stepping forward. "Your father and I, we don't understand. How could you do this to us, to your own mother? After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I asked, and a real, genuine laugh escaped my lips. It was a cold, bitter sound. "You mean like celebrating my 30th birthday by flying to the other side of the world, or providing me with a lovely souvenir keychain to make up for it?" Genevieve flinched as if I had struck her. "We were going to celebrate with you," she stammered, wringing her hands. "It was just, the trip was a deal Alistair got through a client. It was last minute." "It was my birthday, Mom," I said, my voice dropping low. "A milestone, and you chose to spend it without me. That wasn't a last-minute deal. That was a choice." That's when Alistair stormed up the stairs, his face a dark shade of crimson. He pushed past Kasia and my moth. Stopping directly in front of me, his presence filling my doorway. He tried to use his old tactic, physical intimidation. He puffed out his chest, his voice a low growl. "That's enough," he seethed. "This little game of yours is over. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you will call your lawyer and you will cancel this nonsense immediately. You will not throw this family into chaos because your feelings got hurt." I looked my father in the eye. For the first time in my life, I didn't shrink away from his glare. I didn't feel that familiar knot of fear in my stomach. I just felt a profound, liberating pity for him. He was a king who had just discovered his castle was made of sand, and he was still trying to command the tides. "My feelings didn't get hurt, Dad," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My illusions got shattered. There's a difference, and I won't be canceling anything." His fury finally boiled over. "You ungrateful child," he roared, his voice echoing in the hallway. "We gave you a roof over your head." "No," I corrected him calmly. "I gave you a roof over your heads. This is my house. Grandma Eleanor's house. And I have been paying the taxes and the insurance on it for 3 years while you all lived here for free, treating me like I was dirt on your shoe. But the free ride is over." The truth of that statement, spoken aloud in the open, seemed to suck the air out of the hallway. Kasia stared at me, her mouth hanging open. My mother looked at my father, a flicker of confusion in her tear-filled eyes. Alistair was momentarily speechless. He had built his identity on being the provider, the patriarch. I had just dismantled it with a single sentence. He recovered, but his tone shifted. The rage faltered, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone I had never heard from him before. It was the voice of a man who had lost all his leverage. He reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Elara, listen to me," he said, his voice strained. Okay, we made a mistake, the trip. It was a mistake, we're sorry, but you can't do this. Think about your mother, think about your sister's career, think about the family." He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. "We're family, please." There it was, the word he only ever used when he needed something. Family, a shield he would hide behind after sharpening his sword on my back. "Family," I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "When you called me a clown in front of your friends and colleagues, was that a family thing to do? When you deliberately and secretly excluded me from a milestone birthday, was that family. I looked at each of them in turn, Kassia's panicked entitlement, my mother's weak tears, my father's desperate begging. They didn't see a daughter or a sister. They saw a resource they were about to lose. They saw their comfortable lives crumbling. Their pleas weren't born of love, they were born of fear. And I was done being ruled by their needs. "No," I said, the word solid and final. "You don't get to use that word with me anymore. You have 30 days. I stepped back into my room and closed the door, locking it behind me. Their shouts and sobs and pleas continued for a while, but they sounded distant now, like noises from a world I no longer inhabited. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. The days that followed the serving of the notice were a blur of strained silence and pathetic, transparent attempts at manipulation. They cycled through every tactic in their playbook. Genevieve would leave my favorite childhood meals outside my door, a desperate offering I would quietly move to the kitchen counter, untouched. Kassia swung between ignoring me completely and sending me long, rambling text messages, alternating between calling me a monster and reminding me of some long-forgotten happy memory from when we were children, as if a single good day could outweigh 2 decades of neglect. Alistair's approach was the most predictable. He tried to strong-arm me with legal threats, leaving voicemails from his own lawyer that Mr. Davies assured me were baseless and desperate. When that failed, he reverted to his begging, catching me on the stairs once to plead, "Think of your mother's health, Elara. The stress is destroying her." It was a pathetic attempt to weaponize my empathy, but my empathy for them had run dry. It had been replaced by a duty of care for myself. I held firm. I was an anchor in their storm of desperation. Mr. Davies handled all communication, and I began the process of looking for my own apartment, a small, bright space just for me. The for sale sign went up on the lawn a week before the 30-day deadline, a stark, public declaration of the end of an era. The day it was hammered into the ground, my mother wept in the living room for hours. I felt a pang of something, not guilt, but a sad resignation for the mother I wished I'd had. The moving day was bleak and overcast, a fitting backdrop for the final scene. They hadn't found a prestigious new home. Their pride and the short notice had forced them into a rental townhouse across town, a significant downgrade from the grand colonial they had long considered their own. Watching them pack their lives into boxes was a surreal experience. They were taking with them the furniture, the paintings, the rugs, all the props from the stage play of their perfect life. But the stage itself, the foundation of their identity, was being left behind. I stayed in my room for most of the day, but I came out for the final confrontation. They were standing in the empty foyer, surrounded by the last of their things. Alistair's face was gray with defeat. Kassia wouldn't look at me, her expression a mask of sullen resentment. Genevieve just looked lost, a ghost in the house that was no longer hers. "I hope you got what you wanted, Elara," Alistair said, his voice hollow. "I did," I replied, and the honesty of it surprised even me. "I got my peace, I got my home back, and I got the truth." My mother finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, final plea. "Will we ever see you again?" I thought about it for a moment. I thought about holidays, birthdays, the future. I thought about the possibility of forgiveness. But forgiveness required remorse, and I knew in my heart they weren't sorry for how they had treated me. They were only sorry they had gotten caught, sorry they had lost their power over me. "I don't know, Mom," I said softly, "but if we do, it will be on my terms. Not here, not like this. The family you wanted, the one with the perfect lawyer and the perfect doctor, that family can go on. But the clown is leaving the circus." I watched them carry the last box out to their car. I watched them drive away down the street without looking back. And then I closed the front door. The click of the latch echoed in the vast, empty house. And for the first time, the silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was mine. The house sold in less than a month for more than I could have imagined. With the proceeds, I bought a beautiful, sunny loft apartment downtown, filled it with plants and books and art supplies. I invested the rest into my own game development studio, hiring a small team to help me bring my next, much bigger project to life. The success that my father could never understand became the foundation of my new life, a life I built for myself, on my own terms. I am free. The weight I didn't even realize I was carrying, the weight of their expectations, their disappointment, their conditional love, is gone. I am no longer a blurry figure in the background of their family portrait. I am the artist of my own life, and the picture is finally, beautifully, in focus. So I have to ask you, the person listening to this, have you ever been made to feel like the clown in your own life? Have you ever been told your dreams were a joke? I'm here to tell you that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is embrace the label they give you, take a final bow, and walk off their stage for good. Because your show is just about to begin.